If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. I'm feeling so cool, top to the bottom, just cool. When you worry, your face will frown, and that will bring everybody down. So don't worry, be happy. Do more of what makes you happy. Have good vibes only. Turn that frown upside down. The most important decision you could ever make is to be in a good mood. From preschool through adulthood, we're taught a very clear lesson over and over again. Just be happy, because when you're happy, life is good. Sounds simple, right? Maybe not. Since 2013, sales of self-help books in the United States have doubled. And according to the World Health Organization, rates of anxiety and depression around the world have increased by almost 20% in the past 2 decades. These numbers are even higher for teens. It seems we've never had more guidance on how to be happy, yet we've never been so unhappy. As a professor at Penn State, I'm seeing this trend in my classroom too. I started teaching in 1998 when no one had a smartphone or a laptop. Email was more of a novelty than a way of life, and students never came to office hours, even though that was the only way they could get in touch with me. These days, my colleagues joke that I need a bench outside my office because my students are literally lined up outside my door waiting to talk to me. And they're not asking me about class material. They're telling me about how much they're struggling in their lives. They're wondering why they're not happier. I don't need the World Health Organization to tell me people are more stressed out. I see it every day in my students. But I've also felt it in myself too. See, most of my life I've struggled with anxiety. Mine manifests as an existential dread that something terrible is going to happen to me or worse, to someone I love or the world. So 2020, as you can imagine, was challenging, but long before the global pandemic hit, my anxiety had gotten so bad that I had what some might call a breakdown. My therapist, God love her, wouldn't wish that job on anyone, called it my come to Jesus moment. So let's go with that. It started in 2015. For 10 years, I'd been a professor during the day, a musician at night, and a wife and a mama throughout it all. People wrote articles about me, called me Wonder Woman. Everybody thought I was doing great. And from the outside, it looked like I was really happy. But on the inside, every day seemed like an internal battle. My anxiety was worse than it had ever been. Then I began experiencing some unusual physical symptoms. Strange flashes of light in my peripheral vision, the sound of my heartbeat in my ear when I laid down. I consulted with Dr. Google and learned that these were called ocular migraines and pulsatile tinnitus, and that both might be symptoms of a brain tumor. So I consulted with my real live doctor, and she sent me for an MRI just to be safe. Thankfully, the MRI was normal, but my symptoms persisted. So, nevertheless, I persisted too. And then things went from strange to scary. I began having difficulty swallowing. And one night, sitting at home with my family, I found I couldn't say the words I was trying to say. My kids thought this was funny, but my husband and I knew maybe I was having a stroke. So I went to the ER, and after another MRI and a whole lot of blood work, the doctor came back in my room, and looking at my results, he said to me, "You're really healthy. So this must all be stress." This made no sense to me. I'd been doing so much more of what was supposed to make me happy, and my body was breaking down. I decided right then and there that I had to learn why this had happened to me when all I was doing was following the prescription our culture gives us to be happy. I'd like to think that fate stepped in at this point. I was sitting in my office not long after that when a colleague who just joined our department poked his head in to say hello. His name was Dr. Robert Roser, and he was our new professor of caring and compassion. The greatest title a professor could ever have, and Rob totally lives up to it. Now, as luck would have it, one of Rob's graduate students, Blake Colaney, was assigned to be my teaching assistant that semester. Blake and I often got coffee after class, and one day I felt compelled to tell Blake about my come to Jesus moment. And he in turn told me about the work they were doing in Rob's lab. I heard words like contemplative practices, empathy, flourishing, mindfulness. And I learned that Rob, along with Richie Davidson at the University of Wisconsin and David Germano at Virginia, had designed a new course called The Art and Science of Human Flourishing. Their goal was to teach students how to thrive in their lives, not just survive. And they hope to do this by helping students learn to manage their own stress. I was like, sign me up. I started popping into Rob's lab all the time, asking all sorts of questions. They literally couldn't get rid of me. So finally, I just asked Rob if I could sit in on the flourishing class, and he said yes. And here's where my come to Jesus moment, my breakdown, really became my breakthrough. Class began every day with an arrival practice, basically 2 to 3 minutes of guided thought, deep breathing, an invitation to be aware and curious and non judgmental of whatever we were thinking or feeling in the present moment. The class that really resonated with me was the day we talked about emotions. Now, in the social sciences, we tend to think of emotions as either positive or negative. Positive emotions like happiness, joy, love are emotions our culture teaches us to embrace. Negative emotions like anger, sadness, and fear are emotions that our culture teaches us to avoid or at least keep to ourselves. Rob taught us instead to think of emotions as pleasant or unpleasant because all emotions, even the unpleasant ones, maybe especially the unpleasant ones, offer us something important: the chance to investigate why we might be feeling these emotions, and then the opportunity to really process them. The writer Brianna Wiest captures this idea perfectly. She says, your anger, it's telling you where you feel powerless. Your anxiety, it's telling you something in your life is off balance. Your fear, it's telling you what you care about. Your feelings aren't random, they're messengers. Let them speak to you and tell you what you really need. So, this got me to thinking, if the messages we're hearing over and over again from our culture are telling us to run from the negative emotions and only embrace the positive ones, then no wonder we're such a mess. See, the human brain wasn't designed to make us happy, it was designed first and foremost to keep us safe by responding to perceived threats and danger, like a tiger in the bushes ready to pounce. But because many of us in our modern lives no longer have to worry about being chased by a tiger, our brains tend to focus on the threats that do seem real. Threats like social exclusion, loneliness, isolation, not feeling good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, popular enough, rich enough, cool enough, or happy enough. So we do all these things to try and make ourselves feel better, feel happier, and often we just end up feeling worse. What's more, these threats are easy to find every day, right there at our fingertips. But our brains have another amazing capacity, and we call that plasticity. The human brain was designed to change and adapt to new experiences. Like the arrival practices I was doing every day in Rob's class, habits like deep breathing and being in the moment and accepting all emotions have been shown to increase happiness levels and decrease stress. Indeed, Rob's lab is discovering that students who take the flourishing course are reporting reductions in their anxiety and depressive symptoms and greater levels of flourishing. Well, for me, the proof was in the existential pudding. Before my breakthrough, I'd been avoiding all those unpleasant emotions that are simply a part of daily life. But as that semester in Rob's class progressed, I noticed something interesting was happening. I was developing a new relationship with my anxiety. When I felt it coming on, I didn't brace myself, I simply paused, took a few deep breaths, noticed what I was feeling, thought about what those feelings were telling me, and then told myself it's okay to not feel okay. This worked so well for me that I knew I had to share it with my students. So now I do an arrival practice at the beginning of every class I teach. And my students tell me how much these practices help them too. Now, you can do an arrival practice in a number of different ways, but basically they go something like this. You can join me if you'd like. We get comfortable. We center ourselves by putting our feet on the ground. We sit up straight, relax our shoulders, and we begin to breathe deeply. We notice our thoughts and feelings. We acknowledge and accept them for whatever they are, and then we let them go. Then we offer ourselves some loving kindness and compassion. And we extend that compassion to our families, our friends, and the world, because here's the thing: life is hard sometimes. It's painful sometimes, and scary sometimes, and sad sometimes. It's also overwhelmingly beautiful sometimes and filled with joy and happiness and love sometimes. Life is lived in the moment. But it seems to me that maybe our culture has us so focused on the pursuit of happiness that we've forgotten to pay attention to the journey, to all the moments, for better or for worse, that happen along the way. I often tell my students it's not rocket science, but it's not always easy. The trick to being human is to embrace all of life: the ups, the downs, the smiles, the frowns, the good times, the bad times, the happy times, and yes, even the sad times, because life isn't supposed to be good all the time. It's just supposed to be life. But guess what? Once we learn to celebrate life in all of its big, beautiful messiness, it actually gets better. Thank you.